The idea is everybody's looking for, can I just do what's easy? Can I just dump people in? Can I just send a bunch of emails out and get the referrals? If that worked, everybody would be doing it. It's the problem is it doesn't actually work. And once you've done it once, it's really hard to do again.
Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today we have a repeat contender, somebody coming for their second recording. When we started, I was like, oh, look, you were here before, and it was episode 25. Whoa, that is a long time ago. And it's, what's interesting is that when you start out in business and you start doing something and then you do it consistently over time, you forget how long it's been, how long you've been doing it. And that was in 2019 that we had Stacey Brown Randall on the podcast, episode 25, Generating Referrals Without Asking with Stacey Brown Randall. Now, we were real original with the title of that episode because that's the title of her book. So we spent hours in our meetings trying to figure out what we should title that episode, and we settled on just using the name of her book. We're going to have to get a little bit more original for this one. But what's interesting is that so many other people, whatever they were talking about 5 years ago, they've completely changed and they're talking about something different. Not Stacey. No, she is talking about the same thing, generating referrals without asking. It hasn't changed. And the exciting thing is that we get to dive a little bit deeper into the nuances of it. If you want to hear the original episode, we'll link that up in the show notes. You can go to profitwithlaw.com/025, profitwithlaw.com/025. And we're approaching 500 episodes. And that, it just says something about the staying power. Like if you just keep doing something, guess what? Generating referrals without asking is the same thing. It's staying with the system that you create and you lift off and start doing. And it's just, let me get more of those referral partners and just insert them into the system. And we're going to dive into that with Stacey. But really what you need to understand is that the magic is not in the doing, it's in the consistency. And if you stay consistent with it, you will look back 5 years later and say, wow, look at this machine I've built, and not even realize like this was happening all along. So a little bit about Stacey real quick. She's the multiple award-winning author of Generating Business Referrals Without Asking, host of the Roadmap to Referrals podcast, and a national speaker. We got to get you a stage, outside of the US so we can call you an international speaker. Stacey teaches attorneys and other business owners how to generate referrals naturally without manipulating, incentivizing, or even asking. She has been featured in national publications like Entrepreneur Magazine, Investor Business Daily, Forbes, and more, and on the Profit with Law podcast. She received her master's in organizational communication and is married with 3 kids. We were just talking about how her kids were just little babies when we first met back in 2016. And now they're, almost done with high school. So crazy, just time just marches on and people just keep moving and life keeps happening, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm excited to have Stacey here. Stacey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Every time you throw out a date or a year, I'm like, okay, it just means we're getting older. That's really ultimately what that means.
Embrace it. Last year, my 3 older daughters got married from August 3rd to November 6th. In 3 months and 3 days, we made 3 weddings.
Goodness.
And in between wedding 2 and 3, we had a baby. His name is Connor. So it was insane, crazy last year. But, I got married really young. I was 19 when I got married and had my first child. So people are like, oh, wow, you have 3 kids that are married. You must be old. No, I'm not. I'm 44. I am a baby. But it does make me feel old. So yeah, I get it. I understand. It puts me in a different category. And when we start saying, oh, yeah, I met you back in 2016. And that's not even a long time ago. High school was in the 90s. It's yeah, what really makes me feel old is when I run into somebody or I'm doing something with somebody and they are the same age as one of my kids.
Right.
And it's
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, I'm a paramedic here in Rockland County in the town of Rampo. So I have EMTs working alongside of me when I work on the medic truck, and they're 18, they're 20,
Yeah,
they're,
they're
and
babies.
my kids are older than them, and
Right.
it's like these are my colleagues, these are my my coworkers.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. It's, getting old is a trip. But anyway, let's actually make this useful for everybody instead of making everyone who's listening to this feel old. Um, what we talked about in the green room is this concept of, generating referrals without asking. And I'm not sure how much we focused on the without asking part in the first recording that we did, but I want to go there because, um, to your point, that you made in that, in the conversation that people did not hear, is that, the general consensus out there, or the general advice out there, is that a law firm owner should just go and hit their past clients, and hit their friends and family, and build a list and just send out reminders of, here's how to refer business to us, and don't forget to refer business to us, and so on. And you come at it from a completely different angle of doing it without asking. So, um, it seems like that would be easier for people to do, but I don't know about better. And you think it's better. So give me the explanation and why doing it without asking is better than with asking.
Yeah, so it comes down to a few fundamental truths about referrals that I think people just don't understand. And when you understand them, you can kind of see, like, oh, without asking is definitely the better option. And the first thing, so there's a couple of points here that you kind of have to understand how these all intersect for the without asking advice to usually for people to be like, oh, I get it. So the first thing is understanding the science behind referrals. And that is how they happen, why they happen, when they are happening, and then understanding what's going on in the brain of the person who's actually referring someone to you, and the brain of the person who's being referred to you. But it's not just the brain science behind referrals, it's also layering in understanding certain facets of the psychology of trust, the science of social networks, and then a big one is actually behavioral economics. And most people just think, hey, if I want something, I should just ask for it. But asking someone to put their reputation on the line to refer someone to you when it hasn't actually occurred, right? And they don't know anybody, is actually violating the science of why they would refer you in the first place. And what most people don't understand about referrals is it's not about you. Like everybody thinks when I get a new referral, I'm getting a new client, I'm getting more revenue, and that's great for me. Yay, me. This is about me. It has nothing to do with you. Where it starts is your referral source. Some people call them referral partners, doesn't really matter, but your referral source knows somebody that has a problem. And in that moment, what's happening in their brain is the happiness trifecta is kicking into gear, and it's their ability to help someone. And so in that moment, they're like, oh my gosh, I know how to help you. How I'm going to help you is refer you to Stacey or refer you to whoever, right? And that's the only moment that you matter, is because you're just the solution provider. So when there's this overemphasis put on referrals or about you, that's where you get the strategies like asking or incentivizing for them. The other thing that people besides the science don't understand, if you really think about referring someone and you really think about when someone refers someone to you, they want it to be their idea. And when you're always asking them to refer, it's never going to be about them and their idea or their idea to do it. So, because there's two things we need to happen for referrals to happen, and that's desire and opportunity. And you only control desire. People teach you can control opportunity by the asking technique. The truth is, when you're asking people to refer you, if it's not something they would normally do without you having to ask, right, then that becomes the trigger for why they would think about doing it. And most of the time, you're asking them at a point where it's not convenient for them. It's not something that they would even consider doing. And there is no opportunity. So now they've got to go artificially create one, if they're going to actually be able to refer someone to you. There will always be those moments where you have somebody and you happen to ask them and they're like, yes, I was just thinking about this. Here is somebody. The problem is those are few and far between, which means then you're constantly having to ask. That becomes the trigger. I just teach a strategy that's like, hey, you can stay top of mind with those same people. Do never have to ask, never have to always be the one that's asking for them to think about referring you, and build out the ability to get referrals from them. So it's science, it's understanding that referrals aren't about you, it's understanding that you need desire and opportunity for referrals to ultimately happen. And really, it needs to be their idea, but we can certainly have strategies behind that that are going to be able to be the trigger for people to think to refer us while not violating the science or it being their idea or the desire and opportunity.
So I know that your system it revolves around touch points and having a certain number of touch points with somebody throughout the year so that you stay top of mind for them. And then when an opportunity arises, you're the one that they're thinking of. What is the difference between having a bunch of touch points with somebody where you're not asking for a referral and touch points where you are? Like, is it not the same thing that it's still your idea that this concept of they should think of it on their own, but now you just sent them something in the mail and they opened it last week, and so isn't that the same? Like, I'm trying
So,
to understand
so
the difference between those two.
it's not the same thing in terms of how it feels when it lands on the person receiving it, right? The language that we use, we call it referral seeds. That really is the secret sauce of how I make everything work that I do. So we are definitely planting the idea of referrals, but we're not doing it in a direct ask, because what most people won't tell you, because there's a very small number of people on the planet that actually the direct ask is not off-putting to them or a turnoff. For most people, you directly asking them to refer you is giving them work to do. And most people are like, I got enough of my own work. And it doesn't matter how much they care about you. It doesn't matter how long they've known you. In that moment, you've given them work, you've commoditized the relationship, and now they have to decide if they're going to do it or not do it. And so in that moment, that's when it starts to violate the science, is that direct ask. And so, yes, the idea that you could reach out and ask or reach out and not ask, you don't ever know who that's going to offend and who that is going to be like, okay, now I have to do this and I don't have time or the energy to. Does it land? Does asking land on some people and they're like, sure, here, let me open up my LinkedIn profile. Who do you want me to connect you with? Yes, but it is so very rare. Most people never experience that when they're like, hey, will you refer to me? Because that's how not most people are built, right? They want it to be their idea to refer to you, right? They want to make sure that it's honest and it's pure and that they know somebody who has a problem, and that's why they would refer them to you. That's how it typically works for most people, but not everybody, right? There'll always be the outliers where the asking is not a problem for them. The problem is we don't know who is and who isn't. And so with my strategy, yes, we're going to do outreaches, or what we call touch points. We're going to use very specific referral seed language. We never directly ask, right? We never compensate. And it does allow us to stay top of mind. But the biggest thing it does is it shows the other person that we care and that we appreciate, which means it has to be genuine and authentic. And the clients that I work with, they want to take care of the people that do refer to them or have the potential to refer to them. They think that's the way they should do business, is by taking care of those who take care of them. And this just gives them a strategy to do that with having the right language to be able to generate more referrals. But a plan of touch points that's going out to people who've already referred you so that you can get more referrals is one of 19 strategies that I ultimately potentially could teach to a client. Not every client needs all 19, but it's just one tool in the toolbox of understanding how we make referrals work and the way that we want them to. There's just so much that is not understood about referrals, not only just the science piece, but then where it occupies space in your business. We call it the referral ecosystem. So when people are telling you just ask for referrals, you have to decide, is that authentic to you? And is that going to be authentic to the person you're asking? Are they going to be okay with it? Or is it going to be a turnoff? Because they won't tell you if it's a turnoff. But most people get the results of, well, they didn't. They said they'd get back to me. They never did. I got one name, but the person didn't know who I was or why I was following up with them. That's not referrals. None of those are referrals. And so in that regards, it's just an option for a different way to do it if you don't want to ask. And most people who work with me, it's awkward and uncomfortable and they feel desperate when they're asking. And so this is the opportunity to not have to feel that way.
Now, when it comes to lawyers, we're not talking about where a lawyer has a client and they're going to send that client to you and want to get a third of the billings or whatever. Like there's that thing happening in the legal space where, I have somebody out for whatever reason I can't serve them or don't want to serve them, so I'm going to now partner up with another attorney to make that happen. One of the things that I tell my clients, especially early on, if they don't have a marketing strategy, is one of the things that you can do is you can just go to other attorneys and, try to get some cases where they're sending the case over to you and you're just giving them, that referral fee or whatever. Um, that's different than what you're talking about, right? Like you're referring to, like, the referrals that you're talking about is the general population, the people I know and the clients that I had and stuff like that, correct?
Well, some, but it's also other attorneys. I mean, if there's one great thing about people in the legal space is that attorneys will refer to other attorneys. They don't see it as competition, right? I don't know many financial advisors maybe that are referring to other financial advisors unless their book of business is full. In the attorney space, in the legal space, that's one of my favorite things about this industry is that they will refer to each other. But not every attorney, it depends on what state you're in. B, it depends on how you're reading the law about incentivizing. And it has to do with, are you then going to stay on the case? Because that has something to do with whether or not you can then collect a fee, as you had to be a part of the case. And, that all has to do with how a law firm decides to run their business. I absolutely have clients that use my strategies and they generate referrals. And then they also know with some attorneys, they're also going to pay out that commission. With other attorneys, they won't ever pay out that commission fee. And they use my strategy like in its entirety, just the way that it's built and created. So it really depends on the attorney. It really depends on the law firm. Usually I tell folks, let's separate that stuff out so we're really clear about it. But it also has to do with the client knowing that, hey, you can't help me. You're referring me to this other person that will help me. And it's the disclosure piece that has to happen with that client understanding that they're going to get a piece of whatever that client pays them will give back to the other client. It's the same thing in the real estate space, right? If realtors refer to other realtors, there is usually a 25% commission that is given back to the referring realtor, right? The person who sent that client to them. But the client knows that. They know, hey, I'm being referred to this real estate agent. If I work with them, that other agent's going to get dollars. It's all about just what's above board and what's told and what's shared that makes it most important. And then it's just having clear, definitive plans for how you treat each situation so that you're consistent.
Okay, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. Let's bring it back to to referrals, the genuine referrals. I mean, you mentioned a lot of things in your previous explanation where I'm like, oh, there's new information here. There's new stuff. 19 different strategies that you use and referral seeds and all that stuff. Can you give me the framework or what are we doing now to get somebody started in this process of getting referrals?
Yeah, so I always think we look for the low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, if we can get an early win and we can figure out what's happening within someone's business now, usually that goes through the process of someone identifying, do you get referrals now? And how you answer that question, whether I don't know, or I think I do, or here's a range, or here's a definitive number, tells me a lot about tracking and intake, right? And then also it shows me a lot about where are we going to go for your lowest hanging fruit. For most attorneys, and I work with a number of them, it's one of my favorite industries to work in. For most attorneys, what I have found is that they have people referring them. They may not be capturing it correctly. They're probably not taking care of those people correctly, and the way to get more referrals from them. So their low hanging fruit is, hey, if we have people referring to you, let's leverage that and get more from those folks before we worry about layering on another strategy about how we get new people to start referring to you, or that we would layer on another strategy about your referable client experience. And that may have a lot to do with what type of law you do, whether you want to focus on that strategy or not. And so we kind of look at it in that way as what's your low hanging fruit, what's happening now in your business. Let's make sure we're tracking. Let's make sure we've got our intake right. Let's make sure that we have a list of people who've referred us. And that's usually where people start. Hey, you've got people referring you. We can work with that we can get you your low hanging fruit. So I worked with an attorney. She's now been with me for 8 years. But in the very first year that I worked with her, she averaged about 12 referrals a year. Not bad, not great either, right? And that very first year that she worked with me, we got her to 40 referrals. And that was a mix of, she had people referring her. She had been getting an average of 12 referrals a year. So we took that and we went, okay, let's get more referrals from them. But to get to 40, we needed new people referring her as well. So then she learned how to cultivate new people to refer her too. And so those two strategies helped her get to 40. Well, then she continued to grow every year. Then she went to 50 and then 60s and then 70s. And now she's in the 80s of referrals that she receives. And she's a single, like, solopreneur attorney. She obviously has like office manager slash paralegal that helps her. And she just brought on somebody new last year. But that was in some cases, she would tell me in years more than I could handle, but exactly what I needed so I could be picky about the clients that I worked with. And so as that grew, yes, those two strategies were a baseline. Let's get more people, let's get more referrals from the people referring you, and let's make sure we have new people referring you. But then everything else that I teach is really in the nuances. It's, if you don't have a great closing ratio of people that are referred to you into paying clients, there is some strategy and language that we can help work with that. If you get referrals, but you can't close them because they're not the right quality, well, there's a way you have a quality conversation with your referral source so that they understand who to send to you without them getting defensive. So they just stop, right? We don't want them to get defensive. They'll stop referring you. So when I talk about 19 strategies, there's 3 big ones that we call them the foundational 3 strategies. And almost every business is going to put them in place. Almost every law firm is going to put them in place depending on what they do. Everything else is either going to be situational driven or next level driven. Once you've gotten to this place, now you're ready for something else. Situational driven is really that. Are you getting referrals or are you getting word of mouth buzz? Well, there's a strategy to know how to flip that word of mouth buzz or that introduction into an actual referral. So everything else is about, like, it's the nuance, it's the leveling up, it's that we have these referrals. What are we doing with them? How are we closing them? How are we communicating better with our referral sources? It's all the nuances that come with those processes and workflows behind the scenes that make sure we're taking advantage of every opportunity that we have.
How does somebody go about figuring out those nuances and understanding how to do it, how to do this properly?
You know, it's really interesting when people will do, it's one simple, okay, I say simple, it really depends on your tracking. There's one simple strategy that I have everybody do before they work with me, because it tells me everything I need to know about the direction we're going in. And I do something with my clients called a strategy stack. So we only look in 90-day increments. So we'll look at 90 days, what strategies do we need to stack? Meaning, which ones are you going to learn and implement before we add another 90-day strategy stack to what you're doing? When people do the pre-work, they really get clear on if they have people referring them, if they don't, what's their closing ratio, will they need more referral sources, how they're going to set goals. I can look at someone's spreadsheet of their pre-work, because we keep it really simple and everything's done in a spreadsheet. I can look at somebody's pre-work and be like, okay, we're going to have to at some point start with these 4 strategies, but the order we go in, of course, the client and I decide on that together. Because I've just been doing this for over a decade, I just know, looking at the pre-work, okay, I've got something to work with here. We've got referral sources, a number of them are active, meaning they've referred you in the last 2 years. Let's start there. Then let's re-engage our inactive referral sources before we then decide that we want to cultivate new people. Or, wow, you get referrals, but you're not closing any of them. Like, I see all that in the pre-work. And so when I see that, I can be like, wow, you're not closing any of them. Do you need more referrals or do you need better referrals? Let's fix that problem and then worry about getting more referrals. And that pre-work is really simple. It is looking back at your clients, listing them out, the year they became a client, the client's name, and how they heard about you. And if they heard about you through a referral source, then ultimately we want to capture that data. And then we're just looking back over the last 3 or 4 years, who are your clients that were referred to you and who referred them. And then we do it for prospects. And it gives us like one master list, and we can run numbers and we can look at different things. We can figure out who's referring you multiple times, who's only referred you once. All the data you need to decide what strategies you're going to deploy are sitting in that spreadsheet. And it's like a 2-tab spreadsheet with 3 columns, 4 columns each. It's not very complicated, but depending on your intake and your tracking, it could take you a little bit of time to pull the data.
Is there a reason to only hone in on the ones that have referred or that are referring multiple times versus just put all my past clients in there? Put all, like, I mean, everyone has a list. Some are bigger than others. I mean, firm that's been in business for 20 years and, has 6 attorneys might have, their list of clients might be 10,000 long, right? So that's a massive list that if they just insert all those people into the strategy, wouldn't wouldn't that be the best way to go about it? Like to just blast everybody with the same stuff? What
You
what's the
used
logic behind honing in on very specific people?
Yeah, you used one very specific word when you were talking about that example, and that was blast, right? Because if you're going to take 10,000 or 1,000 or a couple hundred clients, you instantly in your mind went to, I'm going to dump them into an email campaign and I'm going to blast them a bunch of emails asking them to ultimately refer me. Could you get some hits off of that? Probably. I would be a little surprised if you didn't get at least a couple of referrals. But will you get long-term sustainable results? And do you know the negative impact that that additional emails hitting your client's inbox would ultimately have on long-term success? The truth is, only about 20 to 30% of clients ultimately end up referring. Like some people are higher, some people are way lower. So it depends on if you want to do something for all your clients. And we have a strategy. It's called referable client experience. But it's not about taking all your clients and blasting them out a 4 email campaign, right? It's about taking your clients through a repeatable client experience where you have specifically placed language that's going to let the idea of referrals percolate as they're working with you and your team, which means your team needs to understand how to do some of these things too. That brings them to the place where referrals are more likely to be their idea. And then if there's someone you're like, I want referrals from this client, you can put them into the different strategy of how to cultivate a new person. The idea is that everybody's looking for, can I just do what's easy? Can I just dump people in? Can I just send a bunch of emails out and get the referrals? If that worked, everybody would be doing it. It's the problem is it doesn't actually work. And once you've done it once, it's really hard to do again. And there's actually data that shows when you send those emails out and your client tunes it out, they start tuning out all the other potential emails that you may be sending to them as well. So it's the idea, right, that when someone refers a client to you, they're putting their reputation on the line. And in that, which they'll never actually tell you, but they all think and feel, is that they want it to be their idea and it's got to be the right opportunity for them to refer to you. Right. And so in that case, the blast email campaign violates what ultimately means someone will refer to you. And it's not just the referring to you. Can you blast out all your clients and get a couple referrals? Yeah. But the problem is, what I see is that you won't close any of those folks into paying clients because for it to be a referral, yeah, your referral source, your client has to refer you to someone else. They have to make the connection. But what people forget to be a referral, the person they're referring to you has to have a need. There's got to be a need identified. That's why they're willing to talk to you, right? So if I don't need an attorney, right? And you're like, oh yeah, probably Stacey needs an attorney. She probably doesn't have a will. She probably doesn't have her estate all set up or whatever, right? Like, yeah, I'll just send Stacey over. I have no desire to talk to you because I got all that stuff figured out, right? So it's the idea here too, is it's not just when you ask me to refer you through a blast email or not, will I do it? Well, the other side of that is if I'm going to send to anybody, can you close them into a client? Because if you can't, then it's just a wasted effort. And in the meantime, you also don't know who saw it and ignored it, got turned off by it, and now it's impacting the other emails from you that they may ultimately open. It's all about that human behavior.
Yeah, so one thing that you said in the explanation that you gave is that, often we're looking for the easy option. We're looking for the thing that's gonna get us results quickly and be on our way. And I actually I'm not looking for something easy, but I want to know about scalability, right? Like
Mhm.
this strategy is awesome, right? But if it's just going to be something that I can only put 100 people into, and I've got a much bigger world than that, then how do I address my bigger population, right? So, what how scalable is this, and can I without blasting emails, but if I'm sending gifts or creating shared experiences or stuff, I'm doing all of those things strategically, whatever those what was the terminology you used for referral seeds? Um,
Planting referral seeds.
yeah, referral seeds. Um, can I do that on a larger scale? If
So
I am a larger organization and I have the team and I have the people, I have like, is this something that's scalable?
yeah, I think it depends on how you choose to define scalable and what that ultimately means. Referrals come from relationships. At the end of the day, nobody's referring someone into a large organization. Typically, they're referring somebody into a person there, or a small organization. They're referring somebody to a person there. Now, keep in mind, there are some industries I don't work in. Right? I don't work in SaaS-based companies like an Uber who wants to mass produce their referral loyalty program, right? To get paid $25 on your next Uber trip when you refer us, right? Like you never talk to anyone at Uber, I mean, other than your driver, and that isn't at the headquarters. So, right, like I don't work with SaaS-based companies. I don't work with online course creators that are trying to bring in like hundreds of thousands of people, right? I don't work in retail or hospitality or even the medical field because then we've got HIPAA issues and all kinds of things there. So the industries where what I teach works, professional services and creative industries like attorneys and interior designers and CPAs and consultants and coaches, like within those, that's just a couple of them, but within those industries of where this works, right? Usually, depending on how their business is structured and built, right, they're never going to need thousands of referrals because they could never work with that many people, right? Unless they had a team of folks. Well, if you have a team of 30 attorneys, each of your attorneys would be running their own strategy for their own referral sources. And that's how it's scalable, is by the person, not because a marketing team is going to come in behind you and do all the touch points, which they certainly can. But part of this is a relationship building because there's a trust factor there for them to refer to you. And so, yeah, it's going to look a little bit different. But one of the first things I always have people do is figure out how many referrals do you need? And that's typically based on how many clients you can help, right? Like, so that's the first deciding question is, do you need 100 referrals if you're a personal injury attorney and really you can only work like 12 cases at a time? Maybe at most. Do you really need 100 referrals? Well, you probably need way more than 12 because not all case is going to be a case. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you need the hundreds and hundreds of referrals, or do you need the quality 30, 40, 50 that gets you to the 12 cases you can actually take to, settlement or to court or whatever? Like, and that depends. If you're an estates and a will planning attorney, well, you're going to need a higher volume, but that's still going to come down to what you're doing. And then what we do in the back end is what we call mass personalization. It's going to be the same thing that we do for a touch point to everybody that's on that list, like referral sources or part of our referable client experience or whatever. But because of what we do, right, it's going to feel personal when they actually ultimately receive it. And that's like the secret sauce of how this works in terms of understanding the what we're saying and the what we're doing and the who we're doing it for. So is it scalable? Yes, but it depends on what you're ultimately looking for to scale to and what that looks like. Because I'll be really honest with somebody, if they come into my program and they're like, hey, I want to work with you, I want to do this. And they're like, and I want to get thousands of referrals a year. I will always break down the why. What can you actually work with? What is your business model? What are we trying to accomplish here? And that doesn't mean everybody's a fit.
Yeah. So is there like a magic number of, for the person who is the relationship the person that the relationship's being created with? So let's say I've got 10 attorneys on staff and each of them is going to be a relationship, beacon or whatever we call that person, right? Is there an ideal number of referral sources that we want to match to that individual? So that when I'm looking at scale and I'm looking at, okay, I've got a team of 30 people and maybe, the attorneys, the paralegals, my legal assistants, all of them could have these relationships, so maybe I've got 15 of those 30 that I can build relationships with. And now I'll design the program around facilitating those relationships with each of those individuals. What's the ideal number?
Yeah, so it kind of depends, right? In terms of who the person is, like who is the attorney that's going to create these relationships and managing these relationships. Some of it is like what relationships do you already have versus how many new ones do we have to add? Because that's going to take a little bit more time. I have some people who are like 30 to 40 referral sources that are referring me every year is exactly what they need. I have others who are like, nope, I want 60 or 70, but they recognize they're going to have to manage that process. When you get above 20 to 25 referral sources, people referring you, then we start looking at levels. Then we start saying, okay, there's just some people who are going to refer you more often versus some people who are going to refer you once a year. All people are special. All people are wonderful, but we are going to categorize them by levels based on what they're doing. And that means what our outreach will be will look different based on what level they're in. And that's how we create the ability for capacity and for people to handle it. And it looks a little bit different, right? In some cases, as to what you'll be doing when you're actually cultivating that relationship, depending on the attorney. You know, my extroverts don't do the same things as my introverts, but that doesn't mean my introverts aren't just as successful as my extroverts. Like, it's just about figuring out how it works for them, their personality, the right strategy, and then making sure we pick the right people as well, and recognizing and identifying the people who are already referring you now. That's a big key to making this work. But it really depends, right? I mean, I have some attorneys, I got tons of referral sources and they're good at managing those relationships, and others are like, just give me a couple dozen and I'll be good.
Yeah, it sounds like the more than the strategy or execution or the language that you use, the most important thing is getting the right people. So if we take a look there for a moment, I know that we kind of glossed over this a few times, but how do you determine who those people are? And what if you choose the wrong one? Like, what if you're developing this whole relationship with somebody, but they never refer? Like, when do you decide that, okay, this was the wrong choice, cut them, add somebody else in? Like,
Yeah.
how does that work?
So there's something that I say a lot to people that work with me when they're trying to turn clients and contacts into referral sources. There's a saying that I say, and I say it at nauseum because you kind of need to remember it. You will kiss a number of frogs before you find your princes and your princesses that'll ultimately be able to refer to you, because nobody walks around with a neon sign saying, I'm an amazing referral source. Build a relationship with me. We don't know that. When you think about the right person that's going to refer to you, it's not just the type of person that will be open to building a relationship with you. They also have to come across your ideal clients. And that's the piece where we can spend more time getting strategic, right? Most of the time, you can figure out who should be or who you want to be referring to you. And then by looking at who's referring you now and being like, wow, okay, I have a lot of attorneys in this space referring to me. Let me look for more attorneys in that space that I can continue to cultivate. So sometimes it's being strategic with the who based on comparison to who's already doing it now. And other times, right, you could be like, this person would be an amazing referral source and they never do it. Well, what you don't know, and it doesn't matter if you cultivate them for a year or not, which is usually the length of time I say cultivate, and then if they don't, move on, right? What you don't know is that they already have someone just like you that they're referring to, and they met that person in college, they went to law school together, and they're never going to refer anybody else but that buddy, and they may never tell you that. So like, you got to recognize not every person you want to refer to you is going to do it, and you will have to kiss a number of frogs, right, before we get to the people who ultimately can refer to us. And so in that case, we usually start larger and then we work down, but we do it in a very systematic way so that you can handle capacity for that. We're not trying to reach out to 100 people on day one, right, and try to build a process. We're going to take a couple, right? Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 8, maybe it's 10, and we're going to do that. And then we're going to look at the next, and we're going to add to it as we go. And the system allows for you to do it that way. But there's no magic bullet. There's no special light. People don't walk around with a halo on top of their head because they're great referral sources. You do have to put in the work and build the relationship. And sometimes you don't know why people won't refer to you. And sometimes it'll take longer than a year. And you did all this cultivating for a year. And that is the point where I tell folks, if you've done the right cultivation for a year and they haven't referred you, you can remove them from your list, right? You're adding people on an ongoing basis anyway. So it's working to our advantage even when people come off the list. But sometimes you can cultivate people for an entire year and they not refer you until like a year later. Like, I had a client who cultivated a very specific referral source that they wanted to get business from. It took 18 months for this client to get that person to ultimately refer to them, but it was worth $500,000. It was like $620,000. So it was worth those 18 months to get that referral, and then all the ones that followed. So, I mean, you have to be strategic about it. And there's, if anyone tells you, you can build a list of who's going to refer you, and I can tell you exactly who on that list will refer you, they're lying, because these are people on the other end. And we have to follow the process, and we have to also accept that it's not every single thing isn't going to fall our way.
You know, I love the idea of the process. I love the process. I love the direct relationship, cultivating the relationship, and um, the thing that really I have the hardest time with is in the role that I play. So what am I? I'm a business coach. I help people with building their business, right? In order to facilitate the growth of the firm, we're trying to create a predictable process, right? We're trying to have them invest in marketing in a way that I know that I'm going to get X amount of leads per month moving forward. Some things are really good at predictability, like Google pay per click, for example, right? Like once I know my numbers, I know that if I throw enough money at the problem, I'm going to get those leads, right? Um, this process, um, it seems like it's more unpredictable or takes a long time. Can you talk to the timing of it? Like I mean, especially since we're starting slow, we're just starting with 2 to 5 people, and then we're adding people to it as we go. How long does it take for somebody to start to see results? And then how consistent are those results if I stick to the plan and I get to my 2025 maximum referral sources? Like what what should somebody expect if they're investing in this solution from a time perspective and financial perspective? What should they expect as far as the the time to return on it or to start to see the ball moving?
Yeah, so let me address kind of your point about that predictability, right? So there's a difference in terms of predictability of lead flow versus predictability of closing into a client. A lot of times when I get on a phone call with an attorney who's considering joining my program, it's because that pay per click that they've been doing, while it may be giving them a great lead flow and the numbers are there and they know how to put the dollars behind it, it's not necessarily equating into quality clients or the type of clients that they want. And so some of this comes down to this is a different strategy. It is not an algorithm. It is not dumping a bunch of money into something and seeing what comes our way. And then what is actually now we got to go qualify and make sure that it's ultimately the right clients for us. There's a place for that. There's a place, like you should never just build your business on one strategy, right? You and I both agree that's crazy. Everybody should have multiple strategies working within their business, from bringing in sales, right? Bringing in clients. And so there's what you're looking for on the back end, right? Whereas it may not feel like you get the predictability of how many referrals am I going to get every month? Because you're right, I can't tell you that. I don't know. What I do know is, because I've been doing this for so long, we set a goal for every client that comes into our program. And that goal is typically to double, triple, or quadruple the referrals that they have been receiving in years past based on their average of referrals received. So that's what we work to do. Somebody comes into my program, they're like, okay, I get 10 referrals a year. I'm like, great, how does 30 sound? Because I'd like to triple that for you. And then we look at the strategies that will ultimately support that that will support that to happen. Some people do it in 90 days. Like I have people come into my program. I had one person last year, they got 15 referrals. I think it was 15 referrals in all of 2022. In their first quarter, they got more than 15 referrals in the first 90 days of being in the program than they did the entire year before, because they were just focused on different strategies and different, right, and different things that they were paying attention to. And so, and then they ended up getting like 65 that entire year that they worked with me. And so the goal here is for people to understand that sometimes this is going to be more about quality over the quantity, but the predictability comes into place of moving them to paying clients and making sure that that is how the process ultimately works. Some people have a lot for me to work with, and we move very quickly and we make that happen. Others, it takes a little bit more time. I was just doing a VIP session for an attorney out and his team of attorneys out in San Diego, and we're looking at everybody's data. And if I were not a betting person, but if I were a betting person, I would have been like, okay, I bet this person's going to be like early on is going to be able to generate a lot of referrals. And it ended up being somebody else on the team. And I was like, okay, it clicked for her faster than I thought it did. Like, and now she's having all the success and it's great and it's amazing. But the reality of it is, it's what they're going to put into it is ultimately what they're going to get out of it. And this strategy is different. This isn't a click a button, put money in behind it, and it's going to magically appear. This is, you're going to build relationships, you're going to get quality referrals. And if you're not, we're going to fix that. You're going to be able to have over a 50% closing ratio. And if you don't, we're going to fix that too, to be able to generate these people into paying clients. Because at the end of the day, that's the metric that I tell folks to pay attention to, is with every lead gen, right? With every source that you have in your business, bringing clients or potential clients in the door, what is the conversion ratio of that actually producing clients and the ideal clients that you want? That's what we're ultimately looking for. And that's what we track and that's what we measure from a referral perspective. So I know the referrals are coming, right? I will never tell somebody how many you're going to get per month, right? That's how it's going to be a very different strategy from pay-per-click. But the quality is there. And then if they're actually able to close into clients, that's going to be at a higher rate. And that's just how
Yeah,
referrals are just different.
yeah, I love that nuanced differentiation because it's true. Like the leads that come in through Google are not the same quality as the referrals coming in. We all know that. We know that intuitively, but looking at the data, and this is very interesting because everyone understands that close rate is something they need to focus on, but breaking down the close rate by lead source and looking at it that way really helps. We from the stuff that we're investing money on, we have something called ROAS, return on ad spend, where we're kind of factoring that in because we're saying what is the revenue that we're generating based on the spend that we're spending. And ideally you want to be at a 5x or above, right? Here it's less about financial investment, more about investment of time, energy, and effort. But it's, when you start looking at that close rate and what it's producing for you, the return is going to be significantly greater with referrals that are coming in. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to do it. So speaking about figuring out how to do it, we're at the end of the show. You shared a lot, and this has been, it's almost like my head's going to explode. There was so much that we talked about, but also so many question marks left behind. So I know that there's a strategy I need to execute, but what is that strategy? I know that there's language I need to use, but what is that language? What is the step by steps? How do I do this? So how do people get in touch with you, learn more about you? Is it just reading your book? Like what is the ideal next step for somebody who just listened to this and they're like, this is the strategy for me. I really need to understand how to establish these relationships and really spend time, effort, and energy on getting to know somebody and getting them to know me so that they just want to refer me business when they have an opportunity.
Yeah, so I would say that the book is usually, or the podcast, Roadmap to Referrals, or the book, Generating Business Referrals Without Asking, is probably the easiest way to like enter yourself into my world, is what I always tell folks, because I think different, I'm going to teach you different, and we're going to be focused on different things from a science perspective to make referrals work within your law firm. And so reading the book is a great way to be like, yes, I'm on board. I get what she's saying and what she's doing. Or same way, just listening to me. And you can also listen to me read the book, but listening to the podcast episodes every week as well. And so those are two great places to start. If you're ready to like dive in and be like, I just need some baseline things in place in my practice before I decide I want to go learn 19 strategies, we do have what we call a starter course. It's called Your Next 5 Referrals. It's actually the things I wish all the companies would put into place, all the business owners would put into place before they come work with me, because it makes my life and my job so much easier to get them to those results we want. So it is things like figuring out your intake process, your thank you process, knowing exactly who refers you and doing some immediate first outreach to them, knowing how to like follow up with prospects that referred prospects that have ghosted you. There's a lot in there that I just like, here's the baseline stuff, like put these basics in place. It's also a great place to start. It's Your Next 5 Referrals. Obviously it costs a little bit more than the book or listening to a free podcast, but I think those are the best 3 places for people to start, all of which can be found on my website, stacybrownrandall.com.
Folks, we'll link that up in the show notes so that you can check out Stacey's website, check out the book, the podcast, as well as that initial starter course that she has available on her website. And if it makes sense for you to go deeper down the rabbit hole with Stacey, I'm sure that she will figure out how to let you know about that once you're in her world. Just so for the folks out there, I am a purchaser of Stacey's course. I've gone through her program. I believe in it. A number of my clients have gone through it. And I really, I know it works. And, but it is also like just the way that you say something is really important. And why go and try to figure it out yourself when somebody can just hand you the playbook? So check Stacey out, read the book, and but I even know like the book, the podcast, they're going to still leave you with questions. And if you want the fastest roadmap to success. It's really just join her stuff, go in there, get, learn it and execute it. And I think that you're going to do great. Folks, this was an amazing interview. I'm excited to have Stacey here a second time and have had this conversation. If you absolutely loved this episode and this is your first time here, or you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, you want to hit that subscribe button in your podcast player, because we're bringing amazing stuff like this every single week. So we'll be back next Thursday with another amazing interview, and can't wait to see you there. Yeah, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next week. Take care.